I was terrified and excited at the same time. The first time, what's called taking a gather, where you insert the pipe into the furnace and spin it to get some glass off the end. You're 4.5 feet away from 2,000 degrees, and the heat's coming out at you. And when you're a beginner, you actually move really slow, and and so because you're mesmerized by the heat, and so you're moving slower than you should, and it actually is really hot and scary. And so I guess it was the challenge to learn how to do it smoothly, you know, to get good at something, to really focus and take the time to practice to get good. That challenge caught me, because I would watch the people that really knew what they were doing, and I was like, I want to do that. I want to be able to be that smooth. And there was something more important about learning how to focus and concentrate. I know some people can sit in a computer for hours, you know, or do numbers or work even with photography. I never had the patience, but for some reason I had the patience to want to learn how to do this. I grew up in Southern California, in the San Fernando Valley, and always had taken art classes since high school, started taking art classes, and even actually before that did drawing and painting, and then printmaking in college and painting, and just seemed to have a natural ability to draw and paint, use color. Color was really important. Then moved to Northern California in my early 20s, and a friend of mine was interested in glass, and he got a kiln, and he and I started doing what's called fused glass, where you're melting stained glass, sheet stained glass, in a kiln, an electric kiln, and then slumping it into molds. So I actually started doing bowls and jewelry back in 1983. Then had an opportunity to take a workshop at California Arts and Crafts in Oakland, and I had been living up in Sonoma at the time. Workshop in glass blowing, and then I got hooked with glass blowing. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. It was, I like to now refer to it as art sport. It was absolutely terrifying, because here you have a 2,000 degree blob of glass on the end of a 4.5 foot pole, and if you're not careful, you could hurt yourself, you could hurt somebody else. You have to keep it turning, you have to be able to chew gum and walk at the same time, basically. So the physical challenge was really, really what caught me. It was like trying to learn how to play tennis or any kind of a sport. I think I respond to the world kinetically instead of intellectually. I'm not an abstract thinker, I'm a kinetic thinker. And this is the same way. You learn by somebody showing you this is how you turn the pipe, this is how you know, this is the timing you need to know on the temperature. I don't know, it was just fascinating. I went through graduate school, and at the very end of graduate school, I hooked up with 2 other gentlemen who were starting a studio, and the 3 of us put a studio together in West Oakland also. And I worked with them for about 4.5 years. We had a shop, and I learned a ton about how to have a studio and technically what you need to know, which is tremendous safety things and gas and electric and welding and like every aspect of what you need to know because you can't go out and buy this equipment. It has to be fabricated for you or by you, a little of everything. So I was building my business for those 4.5 years. Even when I was in college, I was building my business, selling to stores, selling at craft fairs, selling at my own studio sales. And I reached a point where I outgrew the cooperative situation. I needed more production time than they were able to give, because we were sharing it each 2 days a week. And so I was lucky I was able to take a loan from my family and scrape together what it took to put this facility together. Little 1.5er. The work I do now, actually, I'm combining what I know about color. Color is really important to me. The form's important, of course, when you're making vessel shapes. You have to have pleasing form. So the idea of good proportion, the thing itself has to have proportion. The proportions have to be pleasing. And a lot of the proportions I like to use have to do with, relate to the body, I think. you know, how things go from thick to thin. And if you think about arms and legs and just, I think of the body as a vessel form, right? It's carrying our spirit. And then I make vessel forms, bowls and vases and bottles. And when you, and in glass point, when you talk about pieces, you talk about the lip of the piece is the top, this is the shoulder, this is the foot. So it relates back to the body. And some of the pieces I do, they're incredibly simple. One color, one or two colors. And those pieces, I think the form's really, really important because there's nothing going on except this graceful form and this one bold color with a trim, you know, so my basic bowls or a simple vase. Those are what I call my production pieces. But I think with those, the reason they'll be powerful is if the color is, the color's simple, so the form has to be right. The proportions have to be right on those. Then the other pieces, I'm doing the black abstract series or the white abstract series. I'm applying the color really viscerally. My assistants are bringing this hot molted color to me, and I'm laying them down on the bubble and on the piece. And they're in a molted form, and I physically have to push the color around. And what I'm aiming for is an abstract expressionist type painting. But glass is not quite paint. I mean, you can make it kind of look like paint, but it's not paint. It's this sticky, taffy thing that what glassblowers call cold. Once it comes out of the furnace, it has so much working time, and then it stiffens up, and you can't manipulate it any longer. So you have to reheat it, or that's it. So you kind of get this one shot. So I'm still trying to draw in paint with the glass. I guess it is just pure expression about color. You can see some of the pieces, and it's really weird. Sometimes I'll make these pieces, I'll like, that does not work. And I can't explain, I just know. I look at it and I'm like, there's not enough red, or it's not enough, it's just the proportions or the amounts of color next to each other, how they lay down next to each other might not work. And it's not intellectual, it's from the gut. The funny thing is, people know. I'll show my pieces, and the pieces I think work in terms of the way the color's been put on, those pieces always sell right away. And the pieces that don't work, or I think somehow the color didn't fit, they don't sell. So even untrained, what people think that, oh, I don't know anything about art, they do know. It's just when everything comes together and the colors are in proportion and the shape and the form is elegant, everybody knows. We'll see what it looks like when it opens up. Paddle on top. Oh, it's just a wonker, huh? Whoops. It's the new pipe, right? You can only make crooked things on a new straight pipe. If you can't make it big, make it blue. Here we go. A potter told me that. The potters say the same thing. If you can't make it big, make it blue. Yeah. Paddle. Okay. 2 doors. Okay, here we go. Ready to paddle? Paddle. Only is slightly wonky. Yeah, I know. I think when you flip it open, they kind of lose some of that off-centeredness.
You just need the 2 small doors?
I think so. I don't think I need the big one. Hold on a sec. Let's chill this guy up. Okay, is there any ash? That ash gets in there, man, and it just burns right into the piece. I might need the right. Oh, give me the big door. Oh, yes, thank you. Oh, it's so hot. Okay. That's it. Go ahead and suit up then. Woo! Like a sauna. Ready? Okay, I'll meet you over there. Okay, ready? Put it on it. There we go. Just on its bottom. Here we go. Middle shelf. Excellent. Thank you. The glass starts out as batch, B-A-T-C-H. It's a combination of sand, soda, potash, borax, arsenic. There might even be a few other things in there. I buy it already made for me by a local company. It's like a fine white powder. Now, broken up clear glass is called cullet. And actually, it's good to mix a little cullet, recycle, in with the batch. And what I do is it actually takes all day long. I put in about 40 pounds into the crucible at a time, starting in the morning. So about 8 hours later, 6 to 8 hours later, I filled up my 350-pound crucible. The temperature of the furnace has to be brought up to 2,400 degrees for it to be, that's a place where the glass can, or the batch will actually melt into clear glass. At the end of the day, it's cooked another 3 or 4 hours and then turned down to low. And overnight, then cooling back down, it's ready to use the next day. That's where the glass is melted to kind of the consistency of honey. You take a blowpipe, which is a 4.5-foot pipe, stainless steel that's hollow. You would dip it into the furnace, and every time you dip it in, it's called a gather. So most of my pieces are 3 gather pieces, 2 to 3 gather pieces, the bigger pieces 4 and 6. And each time you add more glass, it gets a little heavier. Usually on the first or second gathers when I apply color to the piece. So I'll take a dip in the furnace, get some glass on the end. That's my first gather. And that's most of the time when you put the color on. Either you're going to turn it and roll into the powders and the frits, reheat and reapply those, or we can do this thing called an overlay where the assistant brings a hot wad of color, place it over the top, and kind of smear it over the bubble. These are very technical terms. I always like to liken it to pulling a sock over a foot. So actually when you're looking at like a solid red bowl, it's an illusion. It really is a layer of clear, a thin layer of opaque red, and then 2 or 3 more layers of clear. But when it's blown out, it then appears to be solid red when it really isn't. The color's sandwiched in the layers, and they're added in the beginning stages. If you had a factory and you were making 10,000 blue bowls, you would color the glass inside the furnace. You would have a crucible of colored glass. But in an art studio situation, small production like I do, the best way to do it is to add the color outside the furnace. So I buy colored glass that's chemically compatible or fits with my clear glass. Otherwise, I would have cracking problems. The color can come, in this way, this is where it gets interesting. It's kind of like paint, but it's not. It comes transparent or opaque. It comes in a powdered form, a granulated form like sugar. It comes in like little rock size forms. That's called frit. And then it also comes in these bars, solid bars where you break off a 2.5-inch chunk to make, for instance, the solid color bowls. Again, opaque or transparent. So you can combine these things in a lot of different ways. Basically what you're doing is you're getting your mass of glass on the end of the pipe and you're expanding it by blowing. And it isn't done all at once. It's a cooling and heating process to move the bubble where you want the glass to move. So if you just took all the glass on the end of the pipe and blew as hard as you could, you'd get a big ball, because the glass naturally wants to go round. So you have to decide what you're going to make. Are you going to make a long thing? Are you going to make a vase, a water glass? Or are you going to make a bowl or a ball? And then you go through the process of using the reheating furnace. All the other basic tools, the blocks, the steel table called the marver, all used to heat and cool the glass to make the bubble move where you want it to. I can relate it to blowing a bubble, a bubble gum bubble. You know how you got to get it all flattened up against your tongue and then you blow? and it wants to go round. It has to do with physics, the material wanting to become a ball. You actually make 2/3 of the piece on the blowpipe. So you'll blow up most of your form, and then you have to put a crease in between the blowpipe and the piece, which is called the jack line, and use a specific tool, the jacks, to make that line. And that's a part where the piece is actually going to be broken off the blowpipe. You'll attach another rod to the bottom of the piece, and then break it off the blowpipe, and then do the last third of the piece on what's called the punty. You have to do that switch so you can get inside. Where you work the top half of the piece, you would add a trim color on the lip at that point when you break it off. So in terms of, you are on the blowpipe for about 2/3, and then on the punty for about 1/3 of the piece. And then when the piece is made, or completely made, it's time to break it off with the punty rod. It's actually still about 1,000 degrees in temperature, and it can't be brought to room temperature immediately. It has to have 12 hours to cool in an electric oven called the annealer. Annealing means to cool slowly. So all day long we blow pieces, put them away in what affectionately called the box, or the annealer, and that's controlled by a computer. And the temperature is kept around 900 to 1,000 degrees. And then at night is cycled down to room temperature through various stages of cooling to relieve stresses out of the glass. Otherwise it breaks. It just can't take the stress of going from 1,000 to room temperature in a few minutes. When the pieces come out of the oven the next day, there'll usually be a little button on the bottom that's very sharp, and that was the connection point between the piece and the punty. And different people deal with that in different ways. I grind and polish that down so the piece will sit flat on a table and not be sharp. And so I use a diamond grinder. It's like any kind of sanding process. You use very coarse grit wheels all the way to very smooth or cerium polish. So the piece is taken through 5 different wheels of grinding and polishing. And that's called cold working. And then when you're in the hot shop, you're doing hot working or hot glass. Let's make a little long neck bottle. Whenever you go to work, you actually should know, you preconceive what you're going to make. The time is so valuable. The energy and the blow time, what we call blow time, is so valuable that you don't want to be wasting time. You very rarely go into the shop and not know what you're going to be doing. So I always have drawings I'll do on the chalkboard or on the floor. A lot of times we'll draw on the floor. I'll tell my assistants we're going to make this, this, and this today, or we're going to attempt to, because that doesn't always work. But we're going to make pictures, we're going to make bowls. So everybody knows, because you work, a lot of times you're working with either one or 2 people, so you're a team. So the team needs to know what you're doing so they can know what their job's going to be. And usually you work with the same assistants for years, you hope, and then it gets to a point where you don't have to talk to each other and they know what you need when. It's interesting, there's innumerable ways to make a bowl, and then there's the same steps. Like you always start the piece, you always start the bubble the same. You have to gather up the glass. The first 2 or 3 gathers is always going to be the same, no matter if it's going to be a vase or bowl. So there's the focus has to do with doing these basic steps correctly to set the piece up so that it will come out on center. You know, the color will be evenly distributed. These are little technical things that have to be done correctly. And what you do need to pay attention to these small details. So as if your bubble's not on center from the very get-go, the whole piece, you know, 4 gathers later with all this mass will come out off center. So the basics have to be paid attention to. Because it's repetitive, it's like a sport. The quarterback can say, cue whatever they say, they call out a play, and the players know that he has to run down 10 yards and turn right. If I say we're going to make a bowl with a vase with a handle, and I want a 2-gather handle, they'll know what I mean, and they'll go get it for me and bring it to me. And so the team effort, continuously working together, and a glass blower that's been blowing for 10 years, that even hasn't worked with me very much, would still know what I was talking about. And then we can tweak it to, oh, I like this a little colder, a little hotter. But so there's the team effort, and then there's all good glass blowers know how to make a handle. There's exciting moments. I like when the team's all working together and we're pulling off something. Like some of the bigger pieces, it starts to get a little more difficult, where the timing's more critical, and everybody has to do their part. Otherwise, it doesn't work. It hits the floor. So that's exciting when you actually accomplish your goal, and you bring 3 people together to do that. I really like that. Definitely the experience of making the work with the people is a big plus for me. Do I consider glassblowing art? It was the biggest question in graduate school. The debate, the classic debate. Let's see, my theory actually is when I'm blowing a piece, it's a craft. I'm doing a traditional craft. There's steps involved. They're the same steps that people have done for 10,000 years, or 2,000 years, not 10, about 2,000 years since the Egyptians. I mean, this is what you need to do to make a bowl. These are the steps. It's a craft. So I'm carrying on this ancient tradition with modern tools. I think the art starts to come into play in a lifetime experience. I've already been doing this for 14 years, and as long as my body holds up, I'll keep blowing glass, and maybe even designing and having young whippersnappers blow for me when my body can't, because it is really physical demanding. So the art comes in terms of design, color application, how I apply color. I can bring what I know from painting and or drawing in my line quality into the pieces. But then I really like the idea of this body of work for continuum of 30 years or 40 years, or who knows how long I'll live. But, when I'm 80 and we look back at, there's a lifetime of glass making, that seems to be about art, that I live that experience somehow. And this is what I produced. Art, I think it's important in our daily lives. I think for me, I'm able to express through it, and I have fun with it. I love color, and I think there's so many. Maybe there's children out there that could have been like me that maybe just, this is how they maybe learn through doing things. So when you cut arts programs or craft programs out of school education, how are those people going to, are they going to fall through the cracks? I mean, are they going to not have some joys in their life that they wouldn't discover if they weren't able to take those art classes? It is really a shame they're cutting it out of school, because I think of cultures like the Balinese, where art's incorporated into everyday experience. Everybody makes art. It's not something for only special people that are artists, that are put on this pedestal. I actually think everybody can make art, and if it's making a cake or making some craft thing, little home projects that people should do. And when you cut it out of school situations, people don't realize maybe that they can do these things. And the shame of it being taken out of the school system is they aren't going to get it in school, they aren't going to get it at home. They'll be taught to be great consumers, but they might not be taught how to be great creators. And I guess it just seems like a shame, because there's a deep satisfaction when you make something from nothing, from something basic. There's something interesting that it's really hard for me to connect to or remember, and it's the nicest thing. People buy my work, they collect my work, and I have they come back to me and tell me years later, I bought this bowl from you 2 years ago, and I have it on my kitchen table, and I love it. And it touches their lives, and I saw the bees, I'm like worrying about paying the bills. I forget about that part, and then when they tell me, I think, oh yeah, I'm affecting these people's lives in this kind of really nice way, that they're enjoying this, a really simple thing in their home, but it brings a little color maybe to them, or why they cherish it, I don't know. But I like when they tell me that, and it makes me remember that I'm in all these different people's homes. A little bit of my experience is in their homes, and that's pretty cool. Blow hard. You just got to paddle this bottom, get this thing straight. Stop. We'll do that one more time. And then you want to get the door when I come out? Thank you. Okay, cap. Blow. Stop. And blow. Stop. Okay, let's punny it.